In moments, even the things that we have to unlearn at a later stage, they play a very important role in earlier phases or in other phases of your life.
The upside of a failure on 702 afternoons. And today we're joined by speaker, facilitator, author, and the CEO of the Conversation Strategists, Nozipho Tshabalala, who's fresh from Davos. We take your calls on 011 883 702, the WhatsApp line 072 702 and 702. What was Davos like?
It was Trumpy.
You know, I love hearing you say that is because it has multiple meanings that are all very accurate.
You know, the conversations were laid. It didn't matter whether you were in a little coffee shop listening to people over coffee and a croissant or in the actual sessions. I think there was the definite overshadowing of this moment in history, this political moment. But I also think what was really nice was to see the pushback against the Trumpiness. And we saw this in some of the big speeches, Makani being one of them. But also one of the conversations I moderated with the president of Ghana, President Mahama, was all about what does this mean for Africa now? And what are we going to do in terms of reclaiming our own sovereignty in this new world? So Trumpy in good and bad ways, if I can put it like that.
So in terms of the conversations that you did facilitate, which is the one that stood out the most and why?
You know, I really think that the African sovereignty conversation was a standout moment for me. Because firstly, you saw Africans showing up in force. So we had multiple heads of states and former heads of states in the conversation. And the big thing was, guys, we need to stop talking about this conceptualized idea of sovereignty. And maybe, just maybe, we need a bit of a reality check and to snap out of sort of the feel-good, Ubuntu, common solidarity and ask ourselves, what does that look like in action so that we can actually reclaim back our space? And I felt coming out of that conversation very energized that I think we are in for a reset from an African perspective. But more than that, it wasn't just politicians in the room. There were leaders of international organizations that are not even on the continent saying, we're going to back this reset because we can see that Africa has the ability to lead it. I walked out of that feeling that I was in the right place at the right time for a conversation that is so important for the continent.
So I have to then ask, from your perspective, because I know many of the listeners, those of you that are watching on YouTube, viewing, where do you think the AU is going to fit in this next chapter for Africa?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant question because one of the things that's come out strongly
Just
is
so you know, I absolutely love when guests say that to me. Thank you. That's my little star for the day. And they say, what a great question.
tick, tick, tick.
I get a kick.
So one of the things that's come out of the conversations that institutions are going to be more important than ever before, but not institutions for institutions' sake, those that are able to actually execute on their mandate. And if you look at the space, the Pan-African space that the AU occupies, this is do or die. This is the moment where we say, okay, we know Agenda 2063. We know the big vision that the AU has set out for the continent. Now it's about rubber hitting the road. Are you going to step up to that mandate, or is it going to be a gathering of talk shops, one after the other? And I think we are at at the precipice of really calling whether these institutions are going to work or not. And I think the AU has a lot of buy-in, legitimacy, and credibility. And this is a moment where I really think the AU is going to have to show up or ship off. And I think we've got it because there's nowhere else to go. If you think about, the big international organizations, whether you're looking at like the World Trade Organization and so on, all of those powers are being minimized by the world order that we're seeing that's emerging. So no one's coming to save us. And so the only thing that's left for us is our own institutions and the people that we choose to put in leadership and how we back and invest like entrepreneurs, small businesses. It's basically you're on your own, so you better make it count.
So which country, and actually let me just make it around the world and not just in Africa. Which country would you say is an underdog that nobody is even paying attention to, that might come out of the madness that we're all going through at the moment, that might shock and surprise us?
I wouldn't even reduce it to one country. I would actually reduce it to whoever decides to join the coalition of the willing to make things change. So if one of the big talks that came out of Davos was the speech that was made by Mark Carney, where he was saying, actually, guys, you still have the big superpowers who are going to throw around their weight for as long as they can.
Yep.
But those who are brave enough and courageous enough to come together as a coalition of the willing, with eyes wide open, none of this rose-tinted glasses
Kumbaya vibe.
no kumbaya
Yeah.
vibes, and to say, guys, based around this particular opportunity, this particular leverage, we're going to come together and we're going to put our strength together and we're going to make a difference. And I think countries who are brave enough to step away from their traditional partners and join different coalitions are going to be the underdogs that make it. And this is not about spreading yourself thin. It's actually about really thinking about what actually matters for our national interest and who are we going to align with around those areas. I think we're going to have a reimagination even of what Global South means. I think we're going to have a reimagination of even North-South dialogues, because I think relationships, partnerships and allies it's a free for all now, and people get to choose, or countries get to choose how they reconfigure those relationships. So whether you're an underdog that makes it over the finish line, it's your race to run.
And the beautiful thing, I mean, we're about to come out of the year of the snake, for those of you that know, but it's all about shedding. And I as much as there's so much negativity, I truly am seeing this as a beautiful opportunity. This is like going to be in the history books of what does this new order of the world need to look like. But we continue our conversations with Nozipho on the upside of failure when we come back.
702.
20 minutes after 2 o'clock, we continue with the upside of failure. We're chatting with Nozipho Tshabalala, fresh from the Davos boat. No, I'm just kidding. She landed at the airport, and she is also speaker, facilitator, CEO of the Conversation Strategists, and author as well. And I have to be honest, I've been wanting to have her on my show for a while. Even if you research a person or watch their other interviews, it's not the same when it's yours. 011 883 0702 and the WhatsApp line 072 702 1702. What were you like as a kid growing up? There are many people who early on, whatever that thing is seen from the start, as opposed to people you'll meet who'll be like, oh no, I was nothing like this. I was the kid who didn't talk in class. I was the never lifted my hand. I was forced to participate. What were you like as a child?
I think my consistent thread is that I've always been a confident child. And I attribute that to my parents, and in particular, the conversations that they surrounded me with. I always, even in my book, I talk about the story where I once came home in tears because I'd been teased about my big forehead. And
what big forehead?
Forehead gang. You know this. Don't let the wig fool you. And my mom just said to me, but I don't understand why you're so upset. There's only 3 things in the world that have big foreheads, and all those things are the smartest things ever. And so now I'm intrigued. I'm like, what are you talking about? She says, have you seen the TV? And you remember back in the day, the TV had a thing at the back.
Yes.
She's like, you see, that is the forehead of the TV, and that's so smart. Have you seen the computer? And remember back in the day, we didn't have these
Everything
things
was a microwave.
Right? And then she says, and you. And I carried that conversation as always believing that I'm smart. So I was constantly reminded that I'm smart, I'm capable, I have agency, that my words matter, that my contribution matters. So as a child, I never had a challenge of putting my hand up and having my say. And I think that's probably been a consistent thread from my childhood that's really just never left me. So yes, I've always been the talker.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love, excuse me, I love the fact that, you're touching on something so powerful, which is the power of words and language, especially from parents when you are a child. Being a parent myself, it's, you constantly need to be reminded, like, what's your words, what's your language, because the kids can remember well into their 40s. Remember that time we say, and it just shapes their entire world. In terms of the home life, what was that like as a whole? I mean, what was the structure like in terms of, were both parents there and siblings, and how did that contribute to the woman you are today?
I think one of the greatest gifts that my parents gave me was actually the gift of a mother and a father together in one home. And I say that really knowing that that is not the norm for everyone. But I think now, as a mom and a wife, I have a deeper appreciation for that unit that they kept together at all costs. But outside of that, we grew up in extreme poverty. I speak about this in the book, and I always say that I'm not a fan of parading our poverty, but I'm also less of a fan of minimizing our stories because we want them to fit the modern day narrative. And my origin story is that I come from deep poverty. My mother was a street vendor. My father was a security guard. And based on what my mother could sell off the table, and my father literally putting his body on the line every day to protect the assets of whoever he was working for, that is the thing that actually got me through school, got me and my siblings to everything we have. And so, and I know we're going to talk about failures, but I think one of the things that I had to then work through as a child is being able to navigate the reality of being in a really good school with really rich kids and knowing that you come from the street vendor table and the security guard context.
That contrast.
That contrast.
Yeah.
And as a child having to learn that there's no shame in where you come from and that actually where you're starting has got nothing to do with where you're going. And as young minds, we don't always have the faculty to make that call and that distinction. And so you find yourself sometimes sitting in shame that you have no business being in as a child.
And it's so weird in so many ways how as society we view things that actually do not even make sense. So from the simple things like as kids, the big things are you're being made fun of, right? And we can't even like that stems from somebody's home. Where did one child learn I can make fun of you and make you feel a certain way?
Sure.
Then it becomes, your parents driving this and your parents aren't even driving, but I'm like Audi TT 10 toes, and that shame that gets built into us. How did you start shedding that baggage? And it's not just the shame and the guilt. I'm sure somewhere there's also some level of survivor's guilt where you look at the fact that I come from a neighborhood where we all started in the same place. Some never moved from there, and you've just landed from Davos. You were facilitating a conversation with the president. How have you been able to, and if you've not fully shed it, continue to do what you need to do while carrying it?
I love the fact that you bring survivor's guilt into it because oftentimes we think about survivor's guilt almost externally, like I survived the township that I grew up in or I survived the community. Sometimes the distinction is closer to home where you survive and your siblings do not.
Yes.
And how do you then continue to hold relationships with the people you shared a womb with? And the outcomes of your life are fundamentally different. It's one of the things I talk about in the book as well, having to recalibrate my relationship with my sisters because our journeys and our pathways were, just so different. But I honestly think that, some of the things that we still probably have to reflect on is how do we not carry that survival as a guilt? Because I think therein lies the opportunity to go, how do I translate my story into an everyday normal story that it is entirely possible for someone who comes from Pietermaritzburg with my background to be sitting in Davos and moderating a panel of presidents. How do we normalize that? And I think a lot of it actually has got to do with not only the conversations around you, but also the ones you have with yourself. I think underlying that, one of the things I wanted to land is, and I talk about this in the book as a fundamental failure of my childhood. I was a perfectionist as a child. And as a child, to become a perfectionist, you're socialized into that. And the reason you become socialized into perfection is because you come from a really struggling background. And so then you are taught that you only have one shot at everything.
And even just to add there, I think there's maybe something that has not been said out loud, but for kids who were perfectionists, there are other things that become attached to it.
Yeah.
The early parentification, the loss of the childhood, the feeling responsible for everything and everyone. And I know we'll just say, oh, I'm a perfectionist, oh, I'm an A-type.
And it's so deep, much deeper.
Yes, so we're not even understanding how the levels go of, like now we're speaking about the survivor's guilt, where now you are carrying everybody and everything with you, but now you have your own family.
Yeah.
Now you are a wife and you are a mother, and there are certain things that are no longer yours to carry.
And it starts even earlier. I think that tension begins to knock where you start realizing there are weights that are not yours to carry, but because you've only lived one way where you've had to carry and to be responsible and to be a leader even before your time, you continue to hold on to those things. And one of these moments for me, which sometimes when I speak about it, I'm still literally brought to tears. When my mom passed, I remember my dad saying to me, I don't like the casket that has come with the funeral package. So we must go choose a casket. Here I was, walking in a warehouse with my father, looking at coffins and going, oh, gold handles, oh, satin lining, and just having a moment of, oh, this is surreal. I've never thought I'd have to do that. And while I was doing that, one of my aunts called and she says, no, they're preparing for the funeral. She's like, no, we wanted to check with you. I'm the eldest in this context, whether we should be buying beef or oxtail norox. And I remember the tears just fell because I thought to myself,
decision fatigue.
Like, why must I be the one making this decision?
The first thing I thought about as you said that is decision fatigue.
And how early you start having to carry those decisions. So it took me 2 years of therapy to work through that moment, but also to realize this, that part of the reason why the deferring of that decision had to come to me is that I had also begun to teach my family that I am the only one who's capable of making the decision, of carrying the weight, of leading in whatever context. So it becomes it becomes cyclical because you can't break out of it. You're socialized into it.
It's the default.
And then you carry it.
Yeah.
And then you perpetuate it as well.
Yo, girl.
Kuning.
I'm saying, sorry, I'm relating so much to everything you're saying because also in that moment, it would feel like, are you honestly telling me nobody could decide to buy beef over oxtail? While right now, I'm going through the most difficult loss of my life and I have to now choose, like you said, the satin or the thing. And you want to scream and you want to all of those things. But we continue with the upside of failure. It's time for the news.
702.
Of failure on 702 afternoons at 21 minutes to 3 o'clock. And we're continuing our conversation with our guest for today, Nozipho Tshabalala, speaker, facilitator, CEO, as well as author. Now, if you're thinking, Relebogile, she's been mentioning her book. You didn't even tell us the name. The book is called After the Fires, Unlocking the Power of Letting Go. 011 883 0702 and the WhatsApp line 072 702 702. I feel like I might know the answer because I think our personalities are very similar, even though we've just met. But when you were a child, what was in your mind, what did you believe failure is compared to you today in this moment?
I think failure was probably disappointing my parents. I think that was the biggest thing that I wanted to avoid at all costs. And I think therein lies the seed of that being socialized into perfection. Because your parents, and let me say my parents, put the fear of God in me to say, this is where we're coming from. We're doing everything in our power to try and get you out of this situation. So don't disappoint us. And disappointing us looks like not doing really well at school, being around boys, putting yourself in the risk of a teenage pregnancy. And so as a child, you minimize the space of your childhood because you don't want to fall into those traps. And so on the one hand, while it might be really great because I then became a very academically competent child. I was very competitive academically. I was a goody two shoes of note. I was teacher's pet through and through. those things might sound all like green flags initially, but as they become cemented in your habits, in your mindset, in your DNA, they manifest negatively in other spaces as well. And so when you go through life thinking there's only one shot at things so that you don't disappoint people, at what point do you put that responsibility down and go, oh, actually, maybe there's multiple pathways to get to something. And actually, maybe it's okay to get disappointed sometimes, because then I learned that maybe that wasn't the right route and maybe there's another way of doing things. So it becomes so difficult to unlearn these things at moments when you need to. My husband always laughs at me because I always talk about my absolute frustration at why he wasn't proposing when I thought he needed to be proposing.
So you had the schedule, the timeline, and it has to not just be that schedule, it has to be a specific way.
Listen, I was fast approaching 35. And this guy was not proposing. And in my head, I had a
Sorry,
plan.
how long was it that you were dating, just for context?
4 years, Shem.
Shem.
It was long, though.
You know what? Babes, I'm sure by year 2, you were like, what do you think of this ring?
Listen, by year 1, I'd already begun socializing him into my plan. And therein lies the challenges, because I had been raised into believing that we can plan for everything, and then you manage what you can, you minimize risk as much as possible. So I was like, okay, now we're dating. By 32, 33, we should be married. First baby at 34, second baby by 30.
And this poor man stuck around.
Yes, the poor guy. And, he was such an important part of forcing me to unlearn that lesson that my life is not just going to be collapsed into your plan. I've got my own life. I've got my own dreams, and I've got my own ambition. And having to trust that actually the best way to be in this relationship is to stop trying to control the person and just focus on being happy in the moment. These are things that as a child, I could never have conceived that there's a reality of just being happy in a moment. Because for me, it's almost like, maths, got to be top. Science, because I've got to get all the grades. I've got to get all of these things so that I can get a scholarship. Because if I get a scholarship, then I get to university.
Yes.
If I get to university, then I get a job.
So let me then ask, did you ever struggle with having fun? Because I always joke that I might be that parent that embarrasses my child, where I decide that, well, because I skipped that part of just being a kid, that now I'm going to be a kid and experiment and get tattoos and change my hair color every day, because I never went through that phase. I went straight from school to being a working professional, and I would envy my varsity friend. I know this sounds crazy. I would envy them being like, I was blackout drunk and we had... I envied that, because I was like, firstly, how did you even allow yourself? And then secondly, and now you're like, I'm 40. Am I too old to be?
I think mine was less about having fun. I worked too hard, that I didn't create or leave space for play. And so I'm only discovering rest and play now. It was so hard for me to rest, because all I've ever known is outwork everybody in the room. And that's what secures your space. And that's what keeps you in the room. And that's what keeps you ahead. And suddenly now having to go, actually, rest is actually part of the recipe to staying in the room and getting ahead has been absolutely hard. I still can't nap during the day. But at the very least...
Because of the guilt that it comes with.
Intombazane lele. Like, how's it
While
go?
the sun is out.
While the whole sun is out and you are sleeping. I've really had
Sorry,
to
I want to
unpack that.
die of laughter with this, because I think we completely underestimate, and I think I've said it before to the listeners, when you grow up in a home, our whole conversation was, did you grow up in a home that encouraged sleep or not? And what did that do to you, right?
Yes.
So already, if Kastwana, you can't sleep until the sun is poking you in your behind, and da-da-da-da-da. Now as an adult, and my mom would be like, how rest? I'll be like, did you teach me how to rest?
I don't know how to rest. I don't know how to rest. I literally had to, in part therapy, part also, like, learn how to rest, but also learn that I deserve rest. because I didn't know that I'm worth rest.
Can I also add what else you deserve? Some rest is not a reward for
Exactly.
achieving. Just by the mere fact that you exist, you can be unemployed. You can be a stay-at-home. What do they call? You can be a trophy wife. You deserve rest.
And it doesn't have to be earned. And there it was, having to unlearn that I have to earn it, I have to achieve it. And then play. My goodness. Like, I honestly think my husband is the fun parent because I didn't know how to play. I'm just like, okay, we're going to do an activity, but it must end at this point, and then we move on to serious things. I'm having to learn how to play. One of the things that I've been fired from doing in our marriage is booking anything in relations to holidays.
Why?
Because the poor me and my poverty mindset want to go cheapest flights, cheapest hotels, and we have landed in...
And itinerary and blah, blah, blah.
And so we've landed in very, let's say, places that don't look like the picture on the screen one too many times. And so I have been fired from the job because it's been realized that I haven't realized that I'm no longer in that poverty trap. I still, in moments like that mindset of scarcity takes such a long time to snap out of it that even when you are in absolute abundance, you can't even see the tree for the woods.
Yo, we've got a call on Audible 1-883-0702. Zeno in Midrand. Go ahead.
Hey, Relebogile, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, and you?
I'm doing great. And shout out to my good friend, former colleague out there, Nozi. Hey, Nozi.
Hi, Zeno, so lovely to hear from you. That's amazing.
It's been forever, man.
Oh.
Just so proud of you. Just so proud of you.
Thank you.
I
From
actually
our
thought maybe you
waitressing
might-
days. Waitressing
Actually thought you
days
might-
in university.
Oh, wow.
Working hard.
You know, when she says she doesn't know how to rest, I can attest to that. So usually during the week, I think we were like the only two buddies that would work together. During the week, it would be night shift.
Yeah.
And during the weekend, we would do double shift together. And that was pretty much our routine. And that was exactly what got us. And I must say, Nozi was like one of those committed ones. When she says she was a teacher's pet, I can attest to that.
Oh my gosh. Listen, my most favorite thing is when our Upside of Failure guests in studio have people calling them and connecting with them and also sharing and saying you can attest to it. We need to take another break. When we come back, the Upside of Failure.
702. Be to a step forward.
The Upside of Failure, as we wrap up our conversation with Nozipho Tshabalala. Her book is called After the Fires, Unlocking the Power of Letting Go. 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line 072-702-1702. Dr. Philemon Mahuma, our regular, says, Relebogile and Nozipho, thank you so much for the chat. The deep sharing and vulnerability is a great gift. Congratulations on the book and success at Davos. I have to ask, Nozipho, what made you get so emotional earlier after the phone call?
You know, I literally just was taken back to those moments on the waitressing floor. You know, Zeno and I were at the University of Pretoria together, but we also had to waitress at Tux in order to eat, in order to have enough money to photocopy other people's books because you still couldn't buy your own textbooks. Couldn't stay in res because that was too expensive, to be able to pay rent in Sunnyside. And to remind myself that even this thing that we talk about lightly now, this absolute work ethic was the only thing that got me through. And so in moments, even the things that we have to unlearn at a later stage, they play a very important role in earlier phases or in other phases of your life. I would not have gotten out of that university without those waitressing nights and weekends. I wouldn't have been able to be in school. I wouldn't have been able to eat. I wouldn't have had a place to stay. And coming out of that and then having to unlearn the very thing that allowed me to survive now, and realizing actually that I can't work all the time. I can't expect people around me to be working all the time is absolutely just essentially what this conversation and the book is all about, actually.
Your mom is exceptionally proud of you. I hope you know that. I don't know how I know it, but I know she is. And I hope you give yourself grace in this new chapter of your life. Because yay, rough. And being a mother is hard. And unfortunately, don't worry, apparently most people on this show cry. So it's normal. But also the part that, because I relate so much and connect so much to the planning and the this and the freaking out and the constantly checking the time and the calendar and the this.
Yeah.
I hope you give yourself grace and I hope you can be kind to yourself. And again, you don't have to earn anybody's anything through performance.
Yeah.
Your existence in itself is sufficient, not just for rest, but also for love,
Yeah.
for everything. And I just needed to share that with you, and I hope you know that. I need to ask, what would you leave all the listeners with that you've learned about failure in your life?
Yeah. I think my big lesson about failure is that failure is part of the process. It's part of the recipe. It's part of the equation. We don't learn new ways of doing things, new ways of being, unless we come up against the failure. And when we avoid failure at all costs, we continue on the path that we've been on, and we never know any better. And it's taken me a long time to look at failure in that light, and to also realize that the things that I might have experienced as failure have probably been the biggest gifts of my life. One of those that stands out for me is actually coming to the realization that I don't actually have to be in control of all things and of all people and of all moments, that there's a lot of pathways that lead to the same outcome, that there is joy in experiencing the journey, that there is a lot of joy in not knowing the answer right away, and that what grace and extending grace looks like for me is just giving myself space to think, space just to be still, and space to decide from a better position. And that for me is what I'd like to leave and to say, failure is a gift, man.
I have to share while we're here talking about failure, because I just remembered and I forgot to follow the young lady. I will remember and share with you guys by Monday. There's a young lady on TikTok, and she's doing a challenge called, she's trying to fail. I think she's got 300 or something, a list of trying to fail as quickly as possible and as much as possible in a day. Now, it doesn't just mean like, okay, let me go do an advanced driver's course and fail. It's also simple things like, I saw a nice girl today. Like, it's like, I've met you, like, oh, I met this lady, and then I was scared, but I decided to say, hey, can you be my friend? Maybe we can hang out and have lunch. And she was fully expecting this girl to be like, are you crazy? Like, I don't know
was
you.
weird.
Yes, that was weird. And she's like, why not? Now they're meeting up. Or she went into a store and she said, can I dress up one of your mannequins? And the guy just happened to be like, sure, why not? Like, they didn't ask for her experience. Now she got to take up that challenge to dress up a mannequin. So I want to end off this conversation to say, let us all take up the challenge to see how many failures we can stack up. Because number one, most of the time you'll be surprised. And they don't have to be big things. They can also be tiny, tiny things. Yeah. And you get life experience, and you also make some new friends. Where's your book available?
Everywhere. We are in every major bookstore, including exclusive books. We are online on Amazon as well, so you can now order from anywhere in the world. We are on Take-A-Lot, and a massive thank you to everyone who supported so far. We hit bestseller status in 3 months last year, and so it's just been incredible. We're taking the book to London next month, so thank you very much for that shout out.
Did you hear that? She's taking the book to London.
To London.
Right after the fires, unlocking the power of letting go. Ladies and gentlemen, Nozipho Tshabalala.
You're such a blessing. Thank you.
Spend your afternoon
With Relebogile Mabotja
on 702.